3 rings for the elven kings under the sky, 7 for the dwarf lords in their halls of stone, 9 for mortal men doomed to die, 1 for the Dark Lord on his dark throne in the land of Mordor, where the shadows lie. 1 ring to rule them all, 1 ring to find them, 1 ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them in the land of Mordor, where the shadows lie.
I can't seem to. Let me see this. Move from screen. There, we're back. Okay. I was struggling there for a minute. All right. Well, I guess hello and welcome to all the men and women of the West. And I guess Matt would usually go hail internet. In your own particular charming way.
Hail internet.
Okay, I didn't do it right. I'm sorry.
Which for a long time there was a confusion as to whether it was hail internet or hey litternet. Like I'd come up with a cool thing like the literature internet, the litternet. But
Yeah.
Pick your poison, whichever you prefer. Everybody at the gob. Everybody came and joined us, even though it's a little bit different time. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
All our good friends out there. Yes. So I'm learning something new right now. I had assumed so Dan is still in Canada. Yeah.
See.
All right. There we go. Dan's in Canada. But I had assumed that Joe was in Japan. That is apparently breaking news. Joe is not in Japan. All right.
Joe's in Mordor.
Oh, exactly. Which has bad reception, but yeah.
See,
all right. So Joe,
that's why I'm
been for the last month.
Then. Subtle about things, because if I get caught, Sauron's going to be a little angry.
It does look foggy in Canada, Joe. Dan, do you have a gauze? Is there a fire? Above your?
No, my camera just stinks.
It's an Instagram setting. It just looks cool and atmospheric.
He's filtering because he wants to look better than he usually does.
I'm filtering.
Okay, so Joe, explain to us here. We are doing this at 9 o'clock because you are not in Canada. However, where you are was a bit of a mystery to me till recently. So what have you been up to, sir?
I'm in France, and I'm teaching English here instead of Japan because the pay is usually better here. It's not yet better because right now I'm like the thing with the French is they start you off like as an assistant, as the lowest scum of the earth, below minimum wage and everything. So the thing is, you're to start at the bottom and work your way up. So like your first year of working here is more a test run. So you're paid half to a third of the salary of an actual teacher. You have 20 hours of teaching a week at least, and you have to make do with below minimum wage salary. You have to survive somehow.
Okay.
And it's very difficult in that regard. But year 2, they pretty much triple your salary if you manage to get a proper teaching contract directly with a school.
So you it sounds like you're going to be maybe staying in France for a while then.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So maybe we'll be doing the later evening live streams on a more regular basis. That was a question from Robert, I believe.
Yeah.
So
that, or we shift it to weekends and we do it during the day. But because I'm 6 hours ahead of you guys. Yeah.
All right. I know from watching my Premier League soccer, I got to be like, okay, it's like 10 in the morning for me. So they're doing an afternoon game. I got you.
Oh, right.
All right, I'm in.
You follow European teams.
I do. I do. Well, because little thing on me. When I was a kid, my dad was stationed in Germany, in Frankfurt, Germany. So
cool.
As a little kid, the World Cup came to Germany in 1974. I was a little 3-4-year-old kid and had a huge impact on me and became kind of a lifelong passion of mine. So the European soccer has always been football has been a thing that I've appreciated. So, but that said, also World Cup's coming to the U.S. I have a ticket to an as yet unknown game because they haven't actually assigned the teams yet. But game number 72 in Atlanta, I will be there to with my dad, who was my coach for like 20 years. So it's going to be a cool father-son thing that we do. Anyway, so
all
right.
I'm trying to find the chapter on my Kindle because I couldn't bring my big black book edition.
Okay, very good, very good.
It's just taking me a few.
No worries. I'll kick us off while you find that, and then you've also got, I believe, some slides you can show. I put together a couple of things that are relevant to this chapter.
Yeah.
So today we are talking about the 6th chapter of Book 2 of the Fellowship of the Ring, entitled Lothlorien. Very appropriate. It would be weird if they were in Rivendell. You're like, well, that's kind of odd. Okay, so
the
quick
mirror
summary
of Elrond.
Right, exactly. What the? When last we left our fellowship, they had just lost Gandalf, the bridge of Khazad-dûm, and escaped Moria through the Eastern Gate. Now, Aragorn is forced into the leadership role, guiding the fellowship to the safety of the trees of Lothlorien ahead of a large company of orcs, as it turns out. But before they can meet with Galadriel and Celeborn in Caras-Galadhon, the next chapter, they have to abide by the secretive laws of Lothlorien, and having a dwarf in the party doesn't help matters. With that short summary out of the way, Joe and Dan, are you ready to take us through in a little more detail?
Yeah. Although I will comment that I think that it was terribly racist of them to treat Gimli that way. So
it was. Yeah, no,
they should be doxxed.
It comes off pretty terrible.
We got to cancel.
We'll talk about this. But I actually really appreciate Aragorn's solution to the problem. So anyway.
Yeah. I'm just kidding around about canceling Hell, dear. I actually love him. I have a lot of elf friends. I'm joking. I couldn't resist this joke. Especially since I'm completely disconnected from politics these days, so I can crack fun at everyone. All right, so there's a great scene. Okay, I have the Kindle edition, so I don't know what page it is. So I'm going to go by the Kindle edition. Page 333 of the Kindle edition, and I'll be specifying Kindle, just to make sure people know. We get a great scene involving Aragorn, because it's interesting because in the movie, just to point out a distinction between them, in the movie, Aragorn is the one who says, we'll be swamped with orcs and whatnot. We don't have time for mourning. Like, pull yourself up by the bootstraps, you filthy hobbits. Basically, that's the tone. That always seemed to impress me. But in the book, what he says is, farewell, Gandalf. Did I not say to you, if you pass the doors of Moria, beware. Alas, that I spoke true. What hope have we without you? And so we have a moment where the one who's the most grief-stricken is Aragorn, who, he's the one screaming, why'd you do it, Gandalf? Why did you, throw your life away? I told you, don't do this. And, because, Legolas, Boromir, and Aragorn didn't want to go through Moria. The three of them objected to this route. Of course, Boromir and Gandalf, as we pointed out, you pointed out, Matt, last time, got to bickering. And Gandalf pretty much said the equivalent of, oh, do shut up. I don't care. Sorry, but Gandalf was just, had the, I did a Lord of the Rings stream the other day, and in there, my buddy Patrick and I just giggled about how it's, half of Gandalf's lines eventually are just, oh, do shut up. I don't care. We're doing this. We're going for Moria. And he's just snapping at everyone, and he's just a cranky old man.
Mark points out that Aragorn is the closest to Gandalf, in the group as well. So they certainly have an affinity for each other. And there's probably also that sense of, Aragorn's kind of like, who's going to lead this group now? It's got to be me. I have to assume this mantle now that our leader has fallen, and that's got to be a big emotional moment as well.
Now, one thing that I'll actually say was interesting in the Jackson movie, like, I'm not a fan, I'm a hater, but one interesting decision, just to point out real quick, is that Boromir challenges Aragorn, a little for leadership. And that's more a modern concept in storytelling. But in the novel, Boromir doesn't really do that too much. And
he's almost out of this chapter, by the way. I don't know. Yeah. Boromir's lines in this chapter are, you could count on one hand, I think.
Yeah. Now,
they push him to the side for this.
In the Moria chapters, it seemed Boromir was more content to follow Aragorn's lead than Gandalf's. Whereas in the movie, there's this challenge for leadership. So that's just a little detail that's a little interesting.
I mean, it was interesting going back and reading this in preparation for this this live stream, and that I was actually a little surprised in this reading, like, because I was actually interested in kind of remembering what was Boromir's take on coming to Lothlorien. We'll hear him talk about it later, but as they were entering Lothlorien, because it's obviously for the people. For the men of Gondor, it has a different connotation than, somebody like Legolas or somebody. So, anyway, but he doesn't, we don't really hear from him at all about that. He's kind of okay, let's just get out of here. There are orcs behind us. Let's move on. It seems like he's agreeable to that in this moment.
Now, Joe Quake makes a great point here about, there's the line somewhere, when the mighty fall, the lesser must lead. And that's very true. Somebody wrote on Substack, because I'm more over there these days, The Culturist. He's got like 50,000 followers. But he's very gracious and humble. He's been interacting with someone as small with only 2,700 like myself every once in a while. And he pointed this out, that this is a core concept of the Lord of the Rings, that in between the great men of history, the lesser folk, us peasants, have to lead ourselves sometimes. So, like, how do I put it? I'll use French history because that's something I'm gonna have to, because I work with the History Association, the local one here. I'm going to be meeting with them today. In French medieval history, in between the era of Philippe le Bel and Charles V, Charles the Wise, there was no great men. It was lesser men. And the French people had to survive on their own and figure things out for themselves. And they didn't do too well, but they tried. They had great courage and whatnot against the English, who were led by some of their best leaders. Or you have the Scots, who, like William Wallace, may be famous for a movie, but he was not a great man. He failed. And there was no great man until Robert the Bruce showed up in 1306 to give hope again and, to fight on like Aragorn does. So the concept Tolkien has is that in between great men of history, the lesser must rise to the occasion and must lead themselves. Sometimes they do well, like, like the, let me use an example, a better one. You know what? I'll use Roman history in between the era of, let's say, Vespasian, who was not really a great man. He was just the best they had at the time. And let's say Caligula. And Trajanus. No, Trajanus wasn't even that great. Hadrianus. You have this period of Roman history where nobody really shines with the same glimmer that Augustus did. But you have this period of profoundly interesting fellows and fools. But the lesser people did great. They shined. They knew when to rebel. They knew when not to. They cut their own path. They chose their own leaders much of the time, or they followed the correct leader. And generally, Rome remained stable. But it's also because the soldiers knew not to loot too much, not to cause too much damage, not to do, you know what I mean?
I got you.
The Praetorian Guard aside, like most of the legions were like, we can't damage the city. Why? Well, if we plunder here, it might permanently damage the empire. So while the leaders were sometimes willing to go too far because they were not great men, it was on the peasants and on the middle stock people that, it fell to make that judgment call. and they usually did really well. So you get these periods between great men where the lesser folk do great. Now, all right, let me just take us through here. All right, because Matt prepared this beautiful presentation for us.
It's just something that's a little
I love these
production value. That's all.
I love these things. All right, but Aragorn now, speaking to what I said, we must do without hope, which he's saying that hope lay with Gandalf. Now let's go without it because we don't have any hope of that, of Gandalf. We don't have any hope at all. At least we may yet be avenged. Let us.
And I do feel like that is a central theme in Tolkien's works is this idea of doing the right thing or doing striving against great odds with the idea that there is no hope. Even though we will not succeed, the fact that we will make this attempt is worth something. And so it's somewhat fatalistic, but it's also like this idea of courage in the face of hopelessness. Yes, Shelby, a map. Ta-da!
But it's also
why personally I think that if you're having a great character like Gandalf that helps guide them, eventually they have to learn how to survive without this great mentor. And it allows the other characters to grow, develop themselves, and become just as great as Gandalf.
Yeah. Now, the other thing is that Gandalf eventually, I think that's the line, we must go beyond hope. And they have to go from hope to a fool's hope, as Joe quite rightfully points out. And this is something that we've kind of lost a concept of today, but back in World War I and II, the soldiers had no hope. Like, oftentimes they were put in like trenches or gunboats where like the first line will die no matter what.
No chance. Tolkien, right? Tolkien was in trench warfare.
Yeah, but here's the interesting thing. There were a lot of men who did survive these situations and pressed forward. Like, I was reading a while back, and I spoke with a reporter whose father, who I think was in World War I here in France, and it was interesting comparing our ancestors' experiences. Now, Canadian soldiers were informed by the British Empire, if you don't advance, we kill you. Like you're colonists. You're not real British in our eyes anymore. So especially, like you filthy Scottish or French Canadians. So the Canadians troops and Australian troops developed the mentality, we have to slip, instead of canned food to the Germans, we got to slip them grenades. We got to kill on Christmas truces. We got to be ruthless because we're scared. And the idea the British troops had, like the British command was offended by this and took the attitude, that was dishonorable. But the colonists had the attitude, what were we supposed to let ourselves get shot? Because, we have no hope of survival if we don't fight dirty. And this is something that, now the Germans resented and were terrified of these Australians and Canadians. But looking at it from the Canadian perspective, they were scared. They had no hope. So they had to go beyond hope. And, like you look at the 100 Years' War, you read any kind of report by the French or the Scots of that era, they have no hope. So they're just clinging to desperation. And sometimes that's what's needed. And the thing is, Tolkien really speaks to this sort of stuff. But there's something interesting about the line, we must do without hope. At least we may yet be avenged. Now, this sounds like a line from Aragorn, but if you use it in a different tone, we must do without hope. At least we may yet be avenged. It sounds like something Conan would say. And there was someone a few years ago, he wrote a blog, not mine, but like someone else. And this is what led me to this round of thought that Conan and Aragorn are basically the same character, is that a lot of lines between the two are like, there's a few lines in Hour of the Dragon, which Conan says, which it's like, that sounds more like something Aragorn would say. It's hopeful. It's like, it's about honor, and it's about, the honor of Aquilonia. No one should be allowed to. oh, he has a duty to protect her and whatnot. He will not shirk his duty to his people. You have these lines which are interchangeable between the two. So it's really quite interesting. Anyways, carrying on.
Interesting. Napdragon brings in, hail to thee, Napdragon. He says, the air nomads say hope is a distraction in Avatar Last Airbender. Interesting.
What would they know? They're dead.
Thanks for the addition there, Napdragon. Good to hear from you.
They're dead. DED, dead. So what do they know? I'm joking. Actually, I don't think hope is a distraction so much as it's a sometimes like you have it, and then sometimes you have to go beyond it.
Well, you were talking about obviously this idea of like great leaders, and then you lose these leaders, and then what are the times in between? Well, a great example of that, which is right here early in this chapter, is reflected, pun intended, in the mirror. So we have this bit where before they can go on, Gimli has to go and see Durin's stone and gaze into the mirror. And, this is an incredibly sacred pool to Durin's folk. It's where our wandering Durin the Deathless saw a crown of stars reflected in the pool. And decided that was a sign as where this realm should be built, where Moria eventually should be built. And so we talked about it in the previous chapter, but it's obviously worth mentioning here because they're actually standing and staring into it. That the crown reflected in the pool, and they see it. They see the crown in this. I believe Frodo and Sam see it as well. It had 7 stars. And so we get this. I just think it's interesting that there's a repetition in the mythology of dwarves, elves, and humans of 7 stars. So we have these 7 stars of Durin's crown. They show themselves, in fact, on the doors of Moria. We get the 7 stars that are the Valasirka, the sickle of the Valar, aka the Big Dipper, which in Elven mythology is incredibly important. It's the Valar put that constellation as a sign to tell them, we're on your side against Morgoth. But then you've also got, of course, the crown of Gondor contains 7 gems, and yet the homage to Elendil, 7 stars, 7 stones, and 1 white tree. And so you get this, anyway, this connection of our 3 cultures are all wrapped up in similar mythological elements. These 7 stars are hugely important.
The Valar are leading them from the rear. They're nobly several miles behind them. They're heroically way behind.
Yeah, but they're there in spirit, literally.
Their hearts and prayers are with you.
But we get another important aspect of this, and again, we probably mentioned this in the last chapter, but again, now that we're here at Durin's Stone, if you remember back at the Bridge of Khazad-dûm, when Gandalf is at Balin's tomb and they're reading the journal, it says, "I fear he had ill tidings to record in a fair hand," said Gandalf. "The first clear word is sorrow. The rest of the line is lost, unless it ends in estre. Yes, it must be yestre, followed by day, being the 10th of November. Balin, Lord of Moria, fell in Dimril Dale. He went alone to look in Mirror. An orc shot him from behind a stone." So this is also where Balin was killed. That's grim. So it's a very impactful bit. Obviously, Balin would have been known to Gimli. Gimli's father was a close associate of his. So there's a lot going on there when they go to look in this pool.
There's a lot. And the interesting thing is also that there's the reference to Durin, the seemingly eternal monarch of the dwarves who keeps coming back, reincarnating.
Right.
And just a fun fact, Durin, I think, would be the inspiration for Link from The Legend of Zelda. So I just think that's...
I guess there's a movie coming out with that. Anyway.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah. I have a post I'm going to make about that on Substack because I've got a few concerns. Well, no, just in the
anytime you do a live action of a video game, the odds get a little wavy on whether that's going to be good or not.
I think the pictures look good. It's just the internet reaction had me kind of alarmed because like you had some people kind of swooning over a 17-year-old boy, and I thought, well, that's a little weird and creepy. But
I mean, they didn't have the same reaction when Super Mario had a live action.
Yeah, they didn't goon over Mario, or especially the Mario actor in the 90s. Like they really should have. I mean, come on, that guy. Like, I think the ladies should have been all over themselves for him. But what do I know?
But what's interesting here is when our heroes gaze into the pool, there's a couple of things. So it says they stooped over the dark water. At first, they could see nothing. Then slowly they saw the forms of the encircling mountains mirrored in a profound blue, and the peaks were like plumes of white flame above them. Beyond, there was a space of sky. There, like jewels sunk in the deep, shone glinting stars, though sunlight was in the sky above. Of their own stooping forms, no shadow could be seen. So they couldn't even see their own shadows in the water. There's this hint that it actually has some kind of magical properties. Maybe it's some kind of trick of the light, and water creates depth perception issues and such. But it does have a suggestion that there is this kind of a magical element to this pool.
Now, there's also something else that's interesting, is that Gimli starts to get a little caught up in the moment. And Aragorn tells him, "Be swift then. The sun sinks early. The orcs will not. Maybe come out till after dusk. But we must be far away before nightfall." See, Jackson took the line and put it earlier, right? Like, the place will be swarming with orcs before nightfall. But Tolkien put it here and said it, till after dusk, after nightfall. So, like you had the line moved around. It didn't help Aragorn's character. It turned him into a bit of an unlikable jerk in the movie.
Well, the only thing about that line in that moment that I thought was a little odd is he smiles a little too much. Like, everyone's, literally sobbing. You have Boromir crying, the hobbits are crying. Everyone's looking very distraught. And then there's that weird shot where Aragorn looks up and he sees that, we're near Lothlorien, and there's a smile on his face. And it's just like the wrong time for a smile. That's all.
Yeah.
He could be like grimly like, we have a chance to survive, but not like, all right. Lothlorien.
Yeah. That's why I, like, as a kid, I was like, I don't want to read this book because this movie, like, that guy's just unlikable. Why does he live and not the nice guy over there?
That said, you are awfully hard on these films.
But then when I read the books, I went, oh yeah, that Aragorn got totally mangled.
When we talk about Haldir, we'll bring up the movies again because there's a commenter I don't think is actually watching this live stream, but maybe if you are out there, let me know. The Beautiful Ones is the name of this particular commenter who for the last year has been like, are you going to do a video about Haldir? And I keep saying, well, I don't know that he has enough to make an entire video, but I'll talk about him when we get to that chapter. So anyway, when we start talking Haldir, we'll have to explain somewhat the difference between movie Haldir and book Haldir. But okay, anyway.
I don't remember movie Haldir, so we'll have to
all right.
To that. I don't remember everything.
I got a slide of movie Haldir on the little presentation. So there you go.
Right. I'll move the slide along. We're now approaching, like, the Silver Lode flows into the Great River, and they are now approaching the woods of Lothlorien, which you can see right here. And let's see. This is Galadriel, I believe.
That's Nimrodel, actually.
Nimrodel. Okay.
But you're right. You could be mistaken for Galadriel. But yes, in that case, the artist has called it Nimrodel.
Ooh. Okay. So we have Nimrodel. And
that is Amroth a depiction of Emroth. Since Emroth and Nimrodel are hugely important to this chapter, we kind of see their story spelled out first in the river that bears, Nimrodel's name. Then when they eventually arrive at the end of the chapter at Karen Emroth, and we have the song, or the I guess it's a song, the song that Legolas sings about their relationship. And I have a lot of thoughts actually on their relationship and how it kind of plugs into this story. But anyway,
we'll get to that in a minute, because
in time.
Yeah. I'll just look up one thing. Let me just quickly. I just want to make sure I have the Tolkien Gateway open, just in case, for added info. Let's see.
You.
So we've got now. What I like is that now adding to the Boromir actually does listen to Aragorn thing. When they get closer to the to Lothlorien, they halt, and Aragorn, runs back calling to Boromir, and because Frodo and Sam are bruised because they both got hit in the mines of Moria.
Right.
And Aragorn, who's been distracted and busy with leading, Aragorn had a great line real quick, which says, "My heart will be glad even in the winter," with regards to being in Lothlorien. But the thing is, because Legolas gets excited about being in Lothlorien, but my heart is in winter is an old term, which means I'm in grief. So he's in winter, but he's going to be relieved to be near his grandmother-in-law, so to speak, of sorts.
Right, but it's a place of healing as well in that way. So.
Yeah, and he of course expresses guilt and remorse for having neglected Frodo, and says, "I am sorry, Frodo. So much has happened this day, and we have such need of haste that I have forgotten that you were hurt. And Sam too. You should have spoken. We have done nothing to ease you as we out, though all the orcs of Moria were after us. Come now, a little further on, there's a place where we can rest for a little. There I will do what I can for you. Come, Boromir. We will carry them." He barks out an order and says, "We're going to carry them." And Boromir doesn't even question and just, does what he's told. And, the next scene we cut to them by the fire. Sam was cut by one of the blades wielded by an orc, but it wasn't poisoned, thankfully. So they're lucky. There will be no limb chopping today. So, except for probably the orc Slim. But Sam has proven himself quite the warrior already, is what he's teased about to an extent. As for Frodo, Frodo tries to argue I'm all right. I just need food and all the rest. But the funny thing is, they don't believe him. They think he's just being noble, when in reality, he's not terribly wounded. So there's a bit of
trying to hide the fact that he's got this this mithril coat on.
Yeah. And of course, Aragorn, just strips off Frodo's old jacket and worn tunic, only to then realize, oops, and then he attracts attention to it and just says, "Here's a pretty hobbit skin to wrap an elven princeling in. If it were known that hobbits had such hides, all the hunters of Middle-earth would be riding to the Shire."
It's a good line.
And you have Gimli, who
right, and that's all the arrows of all the hunters in the world would be in vain, which is great too.
Yeah, that's also Gimli bragging about his people's mithril.
That is top tier gear. If you're playing in some kind of a role playing action, you're gonna want the mithril coat,
because the damage reduction on that is just insane.
Oh, insane! Yeah, get your +3 Vorpal sword and you're good to go.
Yep. And the funny thing is, Mary comments on this and then says, "No, I was wondering what you guys were talking about, you and Bilbo. Like, what the heck?" And now, just because it's great armor doesn't mean like he's invincible. So of course, there's a dark blackened bruise on Frodo's right side and breast, so that he's still gonna wince, and he's gonna and his left side is bruised as well. So it's not been fun. And of course,
there's a reason why a lot of armor in Europe, you had to use maces and bludgeoning weapons against them, because often swords wouldn't do it.
At times. But there were swords that, depending on the era and of the type, you could just stab through the armor after one or two decent hits. But the thing was that when slashing, you're trying to get them not to cut through you. Stabbing is something different, but like you don't. If they slash at you, you want that little bit of protection. Stabbing, there might ring mail was pretty good from what I understand, but sometimes if you stab at the right angle and with enough force, it'll just punch through almost any armor, Dan. So
Joe has a good point there. He says the elven princeling line. He says always makes me want to believe the mithril coat belonged to young Yarandil in Gondolin. That's an interesting.
I don't think so.
Interesting prospect. I mean, it's a fun thing to think about, because there are a lot of Gondolin based.
That's fair.
Items that come about, but yeah, I mean, likely not. But yeah, I think you could write an essay where you can make that case.
I like to think that it was probably for someone like young Thorin as a kid.
Gotcha.
Because this was amongst the dwarves and crafted by the dwarves. So I like to think it was probably for one of their princes when he was very young.
Robert's asking if there's ever mentioned that the elves used Athalas as a healing plant.
I don't think there's...
right offhand, I think the answer is no, but I guess I could be proven wrong on that. But
now I'm going to actually come out and defend the elves a little here and say they would have had the knowledge of how to use it, because who taught the Númenóreans?
True.
And
so if you take it back far enough, in other words, you're saying.
Yeah.
If you take the knowledge back far enough, and it's probably going to hit an elf.
Yeah, in the back of the head, and irritate him heavily. But enough.
Snapdragon points out maybe he's being Snapdragon's being silly, but is saying like, well, maybe the mithril coat was supposed to be for Legolas, which would be funny if he's Legolas is just watching Frodo survive all these attacks wearing this thing that he's supposed to be wearing. It'd be funny.
Yeah. But yeah, I'll say that as for the plants, it's enough about hitting the Elrond in the back of the head. Now, let's see. It seems now there's a little interesting note. Sting seems to be dull on page 337 of the Kindle edition, but it was sharp earlier.
Yeah, right. Okay. So, like, in other words, there are orcs nearby, but at this point, they're not that nearby. They've outrun them temporarily.
And now here's an interesting fun fact. In some versions of the myth, Excalibur seems dull at times, but then, it's sharp for its wielder at other times.
Oh, you mean dull as in not having an edge? I was thinking dull as in not glowing.
Okay. I took, because it says it's dull, which I took as not having an edge right now.
I think it's suggesting that it's not glowing, hence there are no orcs around. But that's a good point. I hadn't thought of the multiple definitions of dull.
But if we look at it from shining and glimmering, Excalibur is supposed to shine and glimmer, but it doesn't always. So, like, for example, I think in some versions it does not shine or glimmer for Uther, who's a tyrant, but it shines and glimmers for Arthur, because he's a just.
I think the reason for this inclusion in this moment of this chapter is it's trying to he's highlighting the fact that they're being followed by Gollum. And he's not saying it's Gollum yet, and he's trying to leave some mystery into what is following them. And so the line or the phrase is, he looked at Sting. The blade was dull, yet he had heard something, or thought he had. As soon as the shadows had fallen about them and the road behind was dim, he had heard again the quick patter of feet. Even now he heard it. He turned swiftly. There were two tiny gleams of light behind him, or for a moment he thought he saw them, but at once they slipped away and vanished. So what he's saying is, it's not an orc. See, proof that Sting is not showing that it's an orc, but something is following them. Yeah,
you're right.
And which is also interesting that Frodo checks like that, right? I would do that if I had a dagger that had like a this little signpost. I'd be like, hey, what do you think? You think we're being followed by orcs? Let me check. Nah, we're fine. I'd be doing that all the time, I think. Oh God, it's blue.
Now Frodo does make a mistake here. He only tells Gimli, and Gimli dismisses it. What he should do is tell Aragorn and Legolas, and they would, or even Merry, and the three of them would probably double back, check, and prep a trap and whatnot.
Well, you would think particularly Aragorn, since Aragorn hunted and caught Legolas in the recent past, or not
Gimli,
Legolas.
Yeah.
He hunted Legolas. No, he hunted Gollum.
Well, I would hunt Legolas
he would
if
probably
I could
be like,
and trap him, but but then I would just use him for bait for an elf maiden. So that's me, but enough about my heartlessness. But the thing is, in all seriousness, Gollum is, like I said, this is where we see Frodo's folly a little. Him and Gimli are like, whatever. It was nothing. It was the wind. They don't say that, but it's like, come on, guys. You're on
almost. They've said the night wind blew chill, but yeah. So it's kind of like the.
Yeah. Now, that being said, like I said, I just like these Gondolinian blades being nods to Excalibur a little. It's a nice little nod.
I got you.
But yeah, Gollum, that stresses a bit of the folly of Frodo. Now, if Fatty was here, he wouldn't have made that mistake. But
no, they wouldn't have needed to go to Lothlorien. They would just stand in the road when the 100 orcs arrived. Fredegar would deal with them all one by one,
one at a time.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Now, as they get further into Lothlorien, let me see if I can move us forward.
So that's an image of Haldir.
Okay. I will just take us back here.
Yeah, that's fine. Yep.
As they're heading further into Lothlorien, the team are having different impressions. Aragorn's glad because it's just, this is such a relief. We're a little more than 5 leagues from the gates. And Gimli's just a lot grimmer and says, if elves indeed still dwell here in the darkening world. So it's a little funny that you've got, Aragorn and Legolas basically saying, the glass is half full. Nah, it's half empty, basically. Gimli's just not in a good mood. And originally he was the cheerful one in Moria. He was the one who was like, oh yeah.
I'll tell you what, it proves out that he shouldn't be in a good mood because the way he's treated by Haldir is pretty terrible, to the extent that we'll get to it, but when Gimli's like, look, I'm not going to be blindfolded, so I'll just leave. And the reaction is, well, if you try to leave, we'll kill you. So he's right to be on edge that he's entering a place that has a go away feel from the get go for him, for sure.
Yeah. Now let's be fair. Boromir finally has a line. Which,
he does. Yep. It is perilous. Joe's pointing out that it's maybe a sign that something's not right with him when he's like, lead on, it is perilous.
Yeah. And Aragorn, of course, tells him, not unscathed, but if you say unchanged, then maybe you will speak the truth. But Aragorn does kind of reprimand like he does complain about the lore in Gondor. It says, but lore wanes in Gondor, Boromir. If in the city of those who once were wise, they now speak evil of Lothlorien.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm going to blame Denethor, but I'm a Denethor hater. I think he's an incompetent buffoon and I actually think the movies painted him in a bright light as far as leadership goes.
I mean, there are certainly even in book form, there are reasons you can point to passages where Denethor is not doesn't have the best of personalities.
No, and you've got evil that's spoken of Lothlorien, which is not wise, and I will always point out that Aragorn fought for Gondor once upon a time, and he wasn't welcome because Denethor didn't want him around because his dad liked Aragorn better. So we must never forget how petty and jealous Denethor is. He's jealous of Gandalf, he's jealous of Aragorn, and he likes to chase them out because he's a lesser man of history who's envious and green-eyed towards them, and he's jealous of the fact that Boromir likes Faramir better. So jealousy is his core characteristic. And so I blame him for the waning lore of Gondor.
Steward.
Yeah, it's a matter of I had to tell one student this past week who got a little jealous of another, 2 ears, 1 mouth. It will really help you in life. Because if you only have your mouth, you'll never hear anything. And now I didn't say it harshly, but the student got the message. But that's the wonder of children. They learn quick. And it's far harder to change an adult in some ways. We're more fixed in our ways. Anyways, Legolas cheers on the fact that now enough about squabbling children, that I honestly can't believe I was the one who was expected to reprimand, which was a little odd. Usually I'm not the reprimanding teacher. Let's see. Nimrodel is finally brought up. Okay, I can move the slide along.
Move the slide.
Yes. We finally got to Nimrodel. I'm so sorry for taking so long, everyone. It's Dan's fault. He kept slowing us down.
That's true.
What?
Yep. It's Dan. It's all Dan.
Matt's my witness. But
Frediger would have been done with this chapter by now. Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
But
And I'll deflect all blame to Joe.
And I'll blame it to our friend Guillaume, who's not here, because there's no justice. That's an old family joke. Anyways,
We got 3 countries represented here. I'll just say that. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, Canada, U.S., and France. So basically, we have France in 2 of her colonies.
Good call.
Is it really 3 countries, or is it one country
fair
plus,
enough.
plus ones?
Colonial France.
I'm joking, by the way. I'm joking. But let's see. Well, even if there was someone from England here, I'd say it's France and a colony. But I'm joking. Enough about 1066.
Real fast, just before we leap into what is a fairly big part of this chapter, which is the Nimrodel Emroth story. We're in Lothlorien now, and obviously Lothlorien is famed for its Malorn trees. And so what I wanted to do was kind of get an idea of the actual height in real world terms of the Malorn trees in Lothlorien. And there's actually some verbiage we get from the Treason of Isengard and from the recently published Nature of Middle-earth that talk about the heights of Malorn trees. So we get from the Treason of Isengard, which again is it's an early draft of Lord of the Rings. It says, there was a wide treeless space running in a vast circle before them. Beyond that was a deep grass-clad dike and a high green wall beyond. The ground inside the circle was thick with Malorn trees, the tallest they had yet seen in that land. The highest must have been nearly 200 feet high and of great girth. They had no branches lower than 3 fathoms above the roots. Okay, so the trees in here in Middle Earth are about 200 feet high. The versions of Malorn trees that grew in Numenor, we get from the Nature of Middle Earth. It says in Numenor, the Malorn reached at its tallest height almost 600 feet, and its fruit was a small nut-like fruit with a silver shell pointed at the end. And some were given as a gift by Tar Aldarian to King Gil-galad of Lynn. That's how the Malorn got over here to Middle Earth. But just to say, so in Numenor, you have 600 feet tall Malorn trees. When they grow in the Middle Earth, it's more like 200 feet. And of course, they also came from Aman, so they may have even grown higher there. And just as a point of reference, what is 200 feet tall? What is 600 feet tall? If you look, one of the slides I included is of a redwood forest. I've been to a redwood forest one time in California. I don't know if you guys have ever seen redwood trees, but redwood trees grow up to, depending on the species, the tallest of them grow to about 380 feet. So they grow to about twice the height of what would be the Lothlorien Malorn trees. So all that is to say, these are some huge trees. And apparently Tolkien based his version of Malorn trees on the beech trees that grew in the parks at Oxford. Those would be much shorter, obviously, but the color of the bark and the color of the leaves would be similar. But
anyway. 380 feet, that's 115 meters. Holy crap.
No, I mean, redwood trees are crazy huge. Oh, there you go. Joe is mentioning tallest tree in the world, Hyperion, 381 feet in Redwood National Park. It's just it's
so about
crazy,
116 meters.
It's just hard to contemplate without seeing it, how freaking tall that is. It's a crazy height for a tree. But so impressive. So you can imagine a forest filled with 200 feet plus trees. It's a cool thing to witness. Anyway, sorry, just a little point on what we're visualizing in Lothlorien.
Well, I knew about redwood trees being really tall, and I've always loved redwood and oak trees. So it's why my books are full of redwood and oak trees, and the elves of my world make most of their furnishings out of redwood.
Nice.
Branches that fall mostly, not the actual, or bark that they've torn off, not the actual cutting down of the tree, because unless it's a dying tree. But
if you're into nature, it's worth a trip to go see a redwood forest for sure.
It definitely is. And only Galadriel got these to grow in Middle Earth. Very good point.
Right, and then she obviously, I think you meant Sam there, but yeah, Sam. She gives the proper earth material along with the Malorn seed to grow it.
Mark and Dragon did point out some flaws in my logic, or in some of the points I was making, and it's about how bear in mind, Lothlorien doesn't initially isn't very courteous to Boromir and Gimli, and Gondor and Rohan don't have much contact with Lorien in the past few hundred years, and that's a very good point. It
goes both ways, right? It's not.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to get Lothlorien saying go away, and
Yeah. So
maybe Gondor's too.
I have to concede, and I have to agree with them that they're making a good point here. So yeah, thank you guys for pointing that out. It does help.
Well, and anytime there's an area on your map that's near your region that is incredibly secretive and off limits, you're probably going to come up with either legends about it, or your opinion about that place is going to be colored by the fact that you're not allowed there. So you're probably going to be like, that place is terrible. Whatever.
Or conversely, the Japanese imperial family, peasants weren't allowed to, even most nobles weren't allowed to go near them. And so, you have myths and legends about how wonderful they are that crop up in the medieval period, oh my gosh, they're so important, they're so holy. But then when the novels of the medieval period start coming out, they're not as complimentary because the novels who have contact with them are saying they're not that great. Like some of these guys are buffoons, and so you have, and then that ends up causing some cultural problems, and then it leads to political problems because like, well, when you get a rapist and a party animal who's an incompetent buffoon on the throne, it like, and it all starts coming out about how weird he is, Shirakawa. Everybody starts going, wait, so hold on. The imperial family isn't greater than the rest of us. That there's a bit of that culture shock. Their own culture's big secret group not everything's going public. It's a little funny. Yeah, superstition and then fear. Yeah. But I only pointed out we have to bear in mind Gandalf has not been made welcome in Gondor in some time. Same with Aragorn. We have Denethor who has a track record of chasing very competent people out because he's jealous and fearful of them. But conversely, Galadriel hasn't exactly feel welcome in Lorien. So
I mean, well, I guess they've gone with the idea of like trying to hide away.
That's a fair point.
As possible.
Yeah. Now for the elves, they've got good reason to want to hide a little.
And they've obviously hiding from what at this point? Everybody kind of knows where they are on the map now.
Yeah. Although nobody really wants to invade like Rivendell because there's nothing there except Elrond. Well, it's a nice river, but like nobody really wants it. And
well, it's just hard to get to. It'd be a lot easier to attack Lothlorien. I mean, and obviously both, those regions are both going to come under attack during the Lord of the Rings. It's just that we'd only hear about them really in the appendices. But yeah.
So when planting this is the difference between Galadriel and Elrond. When planting your seeds for a great hidden fort or something, it's all about location. Now, I can't actually sing the song because my throat's still somewhat recovering. So I'm going to beg Matt or Daniel to sing the song of Nimrodel.
Well, I probably won't sing it, but I'd be happy to read the poem. So what I'll do is I'll read this poem and then I will I'll give you the in Unfinished Tales. It describes this in more of a prose format, like what the poem is representing. An elven maid there was of old, a shining star by day. Her mantle white was hemmed with gold, her shoes of silver gray. A star was bound upon her brows, a light was on her hair, as light upon the golden boughs in Lorien the fair. Her hair was long, her limbs were white, and fair she was and free, and in the wind she went as light as leaf of linden tree. Beside the falls of Nimrodel, by water clear and cool, her voice as falling silver fell into the shining pool. Where now she wanders, none can tell, in sunlight or in shade, for lost of yore was Nimrodel, and in the mountains strayed. The elven ship in haven gray, beneath the mountain lee, awaited her for many a day beside the roaring sea. A wind by night in northern lands arose, and loud it cried, drove the ship from elven strands across the streaming tide. When dawn came dim, the land was lost, the mountains sinking gray, beyond the heaving waves that tossed their plumes of blinding spray. Amroth beheld the fading shore, now low beyond the swell, and cursed the faithless ship that bore him far from Nimrodel. Of old he was an elven king, a lord of tree and glen, when golden were the boughs in spring in fair Lothlorien. From helm to sea they saw him leap as arrow from a string, and dive into the water deep as mew upon the wing. The wind was in his flowing hair, the foam about him shone. Afar they saw him strong and fair go riding like a swan. But from the west has come no word, and on the hither shore, no tidings elven folk have heard of Amroth evermore. And so, Mark has asked, wasn't it one of Nimrdel's maids who got lost around the Dol Amroth? And that's how, yes, and that's how elven blood entered his noble line of Gondor. Yeah, that was Mithralas or Mithrelus. That's probably Mithralas.
Yeah.
Yes, she and a human lord had a child. Then she ran away, so I'm not sure how happy that relationship was, but yes, that is how elven blood entered the Knights of Dol Amroth. And of course, Dol Amroth is named after the spot where Amroth drowned, essentially. Oh, thank you very much, Joe. I appreciate that. So in Unfinished Tales, I'm not going to read the entire thing, but I'm going to read the setup because I think it's important. And then I'll kind of summarize the conclusion. So we get this. Amroth was king of Lorien after his father Amdir was slain in the Battle of Dagorlad. So, right, we're talking the War of the Last Alliance. We had that situation where some of the elves that were not under Gil-galad's command, a la those that were led by Amdir and Thranduil's father, Orifer, they kind of made a charge on their own. They're like, charge! You know, where are you going? And in that charge, that ill-fated charge, Amdir, Amroth's father, was slain. So that was the current king of Lothlorien. So as of the end of the Second Age, Amroth was now the king. And it says, his land had peace for many years after the defeat of Sauron. Though Sindarin in descent, he lived after the manner of the Sylvan Elves and housed in the tall trees of a great green mound, ever after called Cairn Amroth. So we'll see that Caras Galadhon is where, in that map, is where Galadriel's currently living. That's kind of the main royal city. But Cairn Amroth is this place where these tall trees where Amroth used to live in the trees, and at that time it was kind of it felt like he was doing it in honor of the Sylvan Elves. So he did this for the love of Nimrodel. For long years he had loved her and had taken no wife, since she would not wed with him. She loved him indeed, for he was beautiful even for one of the Eldar, and valiant and wise. But she was of the Sylvan Elves, and regretted the incoming of the elves from the west, who, as she said, brought wars and destroyed the peace of old. She would speak only the Sylvan tongue, even after it had fallen into disuse among the folk of Lorien, and she dwelt alone beside the falls of the river Nimrodel, to which she gave her name. But when the terror came out of Moria, and the dwarves were driven out, and in their stead orcs crept in, she fled, distraught, alone, south into empty lands. So that's when, obviously, the Balrog arrived in the year 1981 of the Third Age. Amroth followed her, and at last he found her under the eaves of Fangorn, which in those days grew much nearer to Lorien. She dared not enter the wood, for the trees, she said, menaced her, and some moved to bar her way. There, Amroth and Nimrodel held a long debate, and at the last they plighted their troth. To this I will be true, she said, and we shall be wedded, and this is very important, when you bring me to a land of peace. Amroth vowed that for her sake he would leave his people, even in their time of need, and with her seek for such a land. And so they make their way. He's aware of it's not the Grey Havens. It's Ethelond. It's a different location where at that time ships were leaving for the west. A lot of elves were leaving after the Balrog arrived. And so they make their way, which is still, it's a fair way to that south to the coast. Along the way, they get separated. And Amroth gets way ahead of her and arrives at the port town of Ethelond much before she does. So there's basically one boat left. All the boats have left Ethelond except for one. He gets he doesn't want the boat to leave without him, so he basically begs the crew, "Hey, don't leave. My true love's on the way. We're going to head west to this land of peace where we will be happy together in the west. And so the crew agrees to wait for a while. So he's sleeping on the boat just to make sure that the boat doesn't leave without him. During a storm, the ship becomes loose from its moorings and it drifts out to sea. He wakes up. He sees in the middle of the stormy weather, oh my God, we have to go back. It's too late to go back. Basically, the crew's like, we can't go back. We're going on. We're going to be destroyed otherwise. And so he decides to try to swim back to shore so that he can be with Nimrodel. And in that, it says, but when Amroth awoke, the ship was already far from land, crying aloud in despair, Nimrodel! He leapt into the sea and swam towards the fading shore. The mariners with their elvish sight for a long time could see him battling with the waves, until the rising sun gleamed through the clouds and far off lit his bright hair like a spark of gold. That's an interesting point, by the way. He had yellow hair, gold hair. No eyes of elves or men ever saw him again in Middle-earth. Of what befell Nimrodel, nothing is said here, though there are many legends concerning her fate. And so, yeah, it's a very sad tale. He drowned. She basically went into mourning and disappeared. Who knows? We don't know what happened to her. But the interesting little footnote on this is, again, this is in Unfinished Tales. If you read there, it has like the tale of Galadriel and Celeborn, and it mentions Tolkien had at least a half dozen different versions of the story of Galadriel and Celeborn. And in one of them, what's that?
I was going to comment, before Wolverine had half a dozen backstories, Galadriel had even more.
Correct. But in one of those stories, Amroth is actually her son. Which would make sense with the gold hair, right? Galadriel has this, and it's a very rare, obviously, hair color for elves. But so we get this from the Unfinished Tales. The text is much amended, and it is not always possible to see what belongs to the time of composition of the manuscript and what is indefinitely later. This is the case with those references to Amroth that make him the son of Galadriel and Celeborn. But whenever these references were inserted, I think it's virtually certain, this is Christopher Tolkien talking, that it was a new construction, later than the writing of The Lord of the Rings. Had he been supposed to be their son when it was written, the fact would surely have been mentioned. So interesting that it was like a post-Lord of the Rings, Tolkien was writing the idea that perhaps Amroth, instead of being Amdir's son, was in fact the perished son of Galadriel and Celeborn. And when you add that to Celebrian, who had her own terrible trials on Middle-earth, and then, it would add to this real tragedy of their parentage. Their children have disappeared on them, essentially.
And explain why they're so attached to Arwen and Elrond's sons, because they only have their grandchildren left.
Correct.
And it would also explain why Elrond is so eager to cater to them and ensure his children have a relationship with their grandparents, because it's out of pity. And I don't say pity in a negative sense. I mean pity in a positive Tolkienian sense. Pity, as the word is meant to mean.
What's interesting too then is this whole chapter, as I say, is framed around Nimrodel. They're at the river Nimrodel. They're at Cairn Amroth. We get this poem that describes this very tragic love affair between a king and this elven maid. And I might want us to jump to the end of the chapter. Maybe we'll wait to do that. But I think Tolkien is equating Aragorn and Arwen to the Amroth and Nimrodel story, just to suggest that maybe their relationship is doomed, even though we know, it is in some ways ultimately doomed, but at least they have a happy life together. But I think it's showing, as we'll see at the end of this chapter, it shows that I think Aragorn is worrying that their relationship will end up like the Amroth Nimrodel story, that they are kind of fated to not be together, and that she will survive him in some way, and then be sad of the fact that he's parted, which is true. It does happen. But anyway, just to say, I think there is a parallel that's being made as like maybe Aragorn's life with Arwen isn't going to be this wonderful love affair a la like a Beren and Luthien. Maybe it's going to be an Amroth and Nimrodel story. I think that's in there somewhere. Anyway, just throwing that in.
We'll get to the appendixes when we get to it, because
and as I say, they have a very happy relationship. It is not the doom and gloom of Amroth and Nimrodel, but I think he's throwing in the possibility that might be the case here, and like that Aragorn is worried about that, as we see at the end of this chapter.
From a certain perspective, you could say it is doom and gloom, because what happens after Aragorn dies?
Correct.
Or when he's dying,
and in fact, I will bring it out now. Where does Arwen choose to die and be buried? Caer Amroth, where we're about to end this chapter. So anyway,
which I would argue is in a way a rejection of Aragorn, and there's a lot that I found that I read into it, and Arwen is not Luthien.
Mark makes a great point here. He's talking about the parallel to Amroth, because Amroth and Nimrodel say they can only be together when they find a peaceful land together.
Yeah,
and so Aragorn had to make a peaceful land before he can be together with Arwen. Great point. Yeah. Great point, Mark.
Now, what Tolkien does throughout his entire story is foreshadowing with hinting.
Yep.
In the lore. So the thing is, he will build up a lore, like a story, like Amroth and Nimrodel, but really that's foreshadowing Aragorn and Arwen. And so he's established a previous story, but it foreshadows what is to come, and it tells the story in a way of Aragorn and Arwen, but in an opposite sense. Amroth is not successful. Aragorn is.
Joe brings up the point. He says Amroth and Nimrodel seems less applicable because Amroth is an elf.
Yeah, but
although
Aragorn has elvish blood.
Aragorn, being Numenorean, is partially an elf himself. But I think it's more the fact that they're both kings, or future king. Maybe it's more about their position.
Yeah, I think it is.
And so anyway, but yes, you're right. It's not a 1-to-1 correlation. It certainly is not.
No. The thing is, Tolkien puts in these little differences, but really the message is clear. Like, he's hinting and foreshadowing. He uses lore as a tool to kind of hint.
Yeah, quite effectively as well.
Yeah, but it's never a 1-for-1. Like, in a way, Turgon and Thingol are foreshadowing Elrond, but it's not a 1-for-1, because Thingol dies to the dwarves, and Turgon is a terrible king who dies, to Morgoth's
terrible king who died. Oh, poor old Turgon.
Yeah. Wait, everybody's telling him move out.
Better press.
Like, no, I'm good. Like,
it's funny.
But I'd also argue Turgon's foreshadowing in a way Denethor as well, but it's not a 1-for-1. And
how about this? Since we're on the topic of Amroth and Nimrodel, although it means we're going to jump around this chapter a little bit, I do feel like maybe to finish off, basically bracket this discussion on Amroth and Nimrodel, you kind of have to go to the last passage in this thing, and I'll preface that with, in one of Tolkien's letters, very interestingly, he wrote, "I came eventually, and by slow degrees, to write the Lord of the Rings to satisfy myself." So I like that, the fact that he wasn't writing to satisfy himself originally. Of course, without success, At any rate, not above 75%. I love that too. He's like rating his own work to himself. But this is the important part. But now, when the work is no longer hot, immediate, or so personal, certain features of it, and especially certain places, still move me very powerfully. The heart remains in the description of Karen Amroth, end of Volume 1, Book 2, Chapter 6. He goes on to say he's most stirred by the sound of the horses of the Rohirrim at cockcrow, and most grieved by Gollum's failure to repent when interrupted by Sam. But he does say that the heart of this story remains at the end of this chapter. So you're like, wow, okay. He specifically calls it out. Of all the chapters in The Lord of the Rings, he's saying this passage is something that really moves him. And so, and it I think evokes this parallel between Aragorn and Emroth. So we get this thing where Frodo looks over and he sees Aragorn, and because of the nature, I don't know that it even mentions why he's seeing that, but we eventually know, due to the power of Galadriel's ring and the ability to basically hold things in time, he is seeing essentially a memory. Aragorn is remembering at the time when he was being betrothed to Arwen in this spot at Karen Emroth. And Frodo is witnessing it in real time, which is a really cool effect. But so we get this. At the hill's foot, Frodo found Aragorn, standing still and silent as a tree. But in his hand was a small golden bloom of Eleanor, and a light was in his eyes. He was wrapped in some fair memory, and as Frodo looked at him, he knew that he beheld things as they once had been in this same place. For the grim years were removed from the face of Aragorn, and he seemed clothed in white, a young lord, tall and fair, and he spoke words in the elvish tongue to one whom Frodo could not see. Arwen, Vanamelda Namarie, he said. And then he drew a breath, and returning out of his thought, he looked at Frodo and smiled. Here is the heart of elvendom on earth, he said, and here my heart dwells ever. Unless there be a light beyond the dark roads that we still must tread, you and I, come with me. And taking Frodo's hand in his, he left the hill of Karen Amroth and came there never again as living man. And that's the end of the chapter. And I think that does really show this is the moment he's remembering the moment when he he basically gave the same kind of deal to Arwen that Amroth gave to Nimrod. When we find a place of peace, we'll be together. He said it right here in this place. And it says he never came back as a living man. And that's true. He never did. Although really interestingly, Arwen returns here to die and is buried here at Karen Amroth. It does feel like this whole thing is shaped in that way. It's right. And Joe mentions, I'm never sure what to make of as living man. It's a about, really cryptic way of putting it.
Returning in spirit.
Yeah. I mean, maybe he comes back as the memory that Arwen holds with her. Maybe at some point he thought they'd be buried together here. Who knows? But it's a really evocative statement, and the fact that he uses this really powerful memory that Aragorn has in conjunction with the power of Galadriel's ring. So it affects the geography. It affects we're seeing him in this moment that happened many years, not many years, but years earlier. It's really, really cool. And I think it is fantastic, and obviously had a big impact even years later on Tolkien himself. So
what's interesting is also that when the time comes to find a place to rest, we get a funny little discussion between Legolas and Pippin. And Pippin points out, I can't sleep on a perch. And Legolas cracks a bit of wise at the hobbits. Then dig a hole in the ground if that is more after the fashion of your time.
Right.
You must dig deep if you wish to hide from orcs.
And again, we get the thing of like no handrails. That was it's a bit there where they're having to climb up onto these flats, these platforms, and there's no handrails. And I'm like, yeah, why aren't there handrails, guys? Come on now.
Now, see, that's something I did fix with my elves. I put handrails on the trees.
I mean, come on now. It just makes common sense. It's like, guys, OSHA safe. Let's do this. We got, come on. It's a workplace hazard.
Yeah. But they soon hear the soft laughter of the elves. And we have, of course, this is when we meet Haldir and his brothers Rumil and Orofin. And of course, Legolas does the introductions. 8, myself, 4 hobbits, 2 men, one of whom Aragorn is an elf friend of the folk of Western Essie. And they recognize Aragorn, son of Arathorn. And we're not going to do the entire meme of son of whatever, going back to Elros,
Sure.
Because that's great for like as a joke about the movie and whatnot. But it's a good poking fun also at Tolkien for his long heritages for his characters. But we're going to lose too much time doing that. And then Legolas kind of drops the bombshell on them. The 8th is a dwarf. And
yeah, notice how he buries that lead. He talks about everybody else in the group, and they're like, yeah, but didn't you say there was another person? Who's the other one? Who's the last person? Oh, nothing big. Just a dwarf. That's all.
And that's where Haldir says, yeah, he can't pass. It's like, I like you, but not him. Frodo tries to argue the case for him and says, Dian's got a good reputation, and he's one of Dian's trusty people, and he's friendly with Elrond. Elrond chose him to be one of our companions. So,
that's a good comeback, right? That's a good way to say, hey, look, Elrond vouches for this guy. All right.
But we see that Elrond's word doesn't carry any weight. So Haldir's basically like, yeah, okay, whatever. I don't care about that loser. No, I don't need to know. That's not exactly those words. Elrond's not a loser, but he's like, I don't know. It's like, I'm the guard here. No. You're going to need more than just his word. But we have... and Haldir almost makes the utterly stupid mistake of angering Gimli. Now, we don't yet know how deadly Gimli is in battle. But as we see in The Two Towers and The Return of the King, Gimli, as Robert from Indeed Geek has put it, is a machine. Like, this guy is tearing down orcs. He's tearing down, like, everyone. What's interesting is Jackson makes him a buffoon in the battles in the movies. But the thing is, the one who's probably, because he makes Legolas a real action hero, the one who's actually supposed to be the action hero in some ways is Gimli. So Haldir and all his men would probably be genuinely slaughtered by Gimli.
Well, the way that they would survive would be get way high in a tree and just shoot arrows at him. I mean, that's how you would, if you get hand to hand, you're done for.
You're screwed. But the thing is, but on the other hand, it would alienate the rest of the Fellowship. They wouldn't be willing to treat nicely with Lothlorien, and Lothlorien, if they alienate Aragorn, when he retakes Gondor and Arnor, well, you're not going to have a friend there. So it's a matter of Haldir is. There's also Boromir, who's son of the Steward, who's the leader of Gondor. You have Legolas, who's the, it's just, you don't send Haldir to diplomatize, is my point. He's a guardsman.
Yeah, he's a watchman. He's a guard. He's not a diplomat.
Yeah. Now, the dwarves don't have the best relationship with these particular elves. They've got a good one with Elrond, but Elrond's basically the Oracle of Delphi. Galadriel's all but in retirement with her people, so like different relationship, and the mistakes nearly made here could have been fatal to Middle Earth. And we see here that Haldir, well, I'm just saying, like, he probably should have sent someone back to consult and, ask, like, what do I do here? I've got some pretty important VIPs here.
One of the reasons why perhaps the relationship with Elrond would be different than the relationship between dwarves and Galadriel would be that Galadriel spent time living with Melian and Thingol in the First Age.
Exactly.
And that's when you had the situation where Thingol ends up getting killed by the dwarves. And so she would have that memory, whereas Elrond would have been born much later, and that wouldn't be a thing.
That's a very important point, because if we recall, Thingol did nothing wrong. I will actually say that. He did nothing wrong. The combination of Silmaril and the one pendant was those were his property. That belonged to him, and he had paid his dwarves well for centuries, so that when they betrayed him, it came out of the blue. Like it's Order 66. He didn't see it coming. He should have, on some level, given. Well, maybe not. Actually, I don't think anyone could have predicted the dwarves would go nuts the way they did, and all but want to burn the place down and storm out. Like, he couldn't have known how they'd react. So, killing him in his basement is pretty low. So Galadriel having a bit of the sense, I don't really want them near me, makes sense, because she got a firsthand view of how greedy and violent many of the dwarves can be. But what's interesting is that Elrond had a different relationship with them. He forged a pretty positive one, because he met them primarily when he was an adult. And from there, he was able to meet the best of them and actually interact with some of their worst. And
they fought together against Sauron in the Second Age.
They fought together. So it's a much more positive relationship from the start. Whereas Galadriel, the first real contact is with Thingol's murder. Which
Mark's pointing out that Thingol did plenty wrong. He did do plenty wrong. I think what Joe is saying, that in the relationship, in the argument that got him killed, it was more of a, hey, dwarves, could you put this really important gem in this necklace? I'll pay for it. Sure, we will. Hey, by the way, we like it now. We're not giving it back. Give it back. I'll give it back in your back. And then,
that's so it was more how the conversation really went.
But yes, did Thingol make some big errors and did some not so morally pure things? Yeah, he did.
Yeah. That's fair with the Baron thing. But we have to also bear in mind, he comes to love Baron, and, he does care a lot about him. And so, he screws up there a lot. And then he nearly burns down his relationship with his daughter, which we got to compare Baron.
A mild mistake.
Well, yeah, but we also have to compare. We have to remember, like, Triton from Little Mermaid is basically inspired by Thingol. So, like, he's got his temper. He makes his mistakes, but he tries to atone. He tries to make up for it.
I think it's like if you were trying to assign blame to who started it in that particular, war. It would end up being a war of sorts between the dwarves and the elves. But on the way it's written on the surface, it feels like you would give more fault to the dwarves than to Thingol and the elves for starting, what became this ages-long enmity between the two.
Yeah. Now, the trouble is, Thingol is, it's like, all right, here's the money. Here, can you do this? Sure. By the way, can we keep it? What? No. Like, I pay you for
That's
something.
the whole point of me doing it, because I wanted it back. You should.
Well, we'll give it to you back in your back. Yeah, like there's no. It's Tingle is, like I don't really blame him. I actually think he's.
Oh, okay. Mark points out, the Cimmeral's written from more the perspective of the elves. Good point. It's not a dwarven history. It's an elven history.
We got to bear in mind the Silmarillion is also got some dwarves who help write it.
So, well, it does, but I think Mark is correct in that it's kind of a
pro-dwarvish propaganda. The dwarves come out looking really good. I mean, the Battle of Sun and Flame, they fight really well there. They you've got all those lies about them created by one of the Valar. Like they come off looking pretty good. I'm joking.
All right. So when it comes to Haldir, as I mentioned, I'm abiding by the wishes of commenter, the beautiful ones, who was very persistent in requesting some Haldir info. So, movie Haldir. There is a slide that shows movie Haldir. Movie Haldir fought at Helm's Deep and perished there. That is a movie Haldir. Book Haldir does not. None of the elves go to or fight at Helm's Deep, other than Legolas. So, movie version has a significantly elevated role than book version. That said, there are some revealing bits of dialogue, and I want to run through a couple of them here, because it shows. First of all, I'll read out the quotes, and then I'll explain what I think is behind them. So right when he says welcome, we say welcome. The elf then said again in the common language, speaking slowly, "We seldom use any tongue but our own, for we dwell now in the heart of the forest. Do not willingly have dealings with any other folk. Even our own kindred in the north are sundered from us. But there are some of us who still go abroad for the gathering of news and the watching of our enemies, and they speak the languages of other lands. I am one. Haldir is my name." Okay, so we get the idea. He doesn't. He's not really big on the common language, but supposedly he's one of the few of this group of Sylvan elves that actually do venture into other lands, supposedly. Although what he's about to say later seems to counteract that theory. But according to him, he's one of the guys that's like, hey, I go out and about. I know things. So we get another quote later where he says, "We had not heard of hobbits, of halflings, for many a long year, did not know that any yet dwelt in Middle-earth." So what that suggests is he remembered the time, let's say back when the hobbits, when the halflings were originally living, probably the ones that were living in the Vale of the Anduin early in the Third Age, because they were dealing with the Northmen and such. So maybe he remembers that group. But just to say, he's not aware the halflings are around right now. That's news to him. Then he says later, "Alas for Lothlorien that I love. It would be a poor life in a land where no Malorn grew. But if there are Malorn trees beyond the great sea, none have reported it." Okay, A, there are Malorn trees beyond the great sea, and B, Galadriel would know that very well because she would have seen them. So it's weird that no one's reported that. He doesn't realize there are Malorn trees somewhere else. Then you get this quote where he says, "It is rumored that we cannot now safely pass southward through Rohan, and the mouths of the great river are watched by the enemy. Even if we could come to the shores of the sea, we should find no longer any shelter there. It is said that there are still havens of the high elves, but they are far north and west beyond the land of the halflings. But where they may be, though the Lord and Lady may know, I do not." And then Mary comes in. "You ought to at least guess, since you've seen us. There are elf havens west of my land, the Shire, where hobbits live." And he says, happy folk are hobbits who dwell near the shores of the sea. It is long, indeed, since any of my folk have looked on it. yet still we remembered in song, tell me of these havens as we walk. So he doesn't know about the Grey Havens. This guy, he's very he's fairly clueless about the world, considering he's one of the few who supposedly have like ventured forth out of this woods. And so it's a weird. They're very provincial.
Yeah.
I'll say this: it's why hasn't Galadriel told her people about the Grey Havens or the Malorn trees?
It might be that she's told some of them, but like not everyone paid attention, or that it's been a while.
Sure, it could be a general lack of interest in the outside world.
Yeah, I think it's just more lack of interest. And
I'll just say this: if I was a conspiracy theorist, and I'm not, I think you could fashion a version of this story where Galadriel is staying deliberately tight-lipped about journeying to the west because she doesn't want change. She wants to keep Lothlorien essentially, under glass. And if all of Lothlorien heads west, this area goes, belly up. And so she's not really, hey, if you guys want to leave, here's how you get there. You just go to the Grey Havens. Yeah, you can just get it that way. And yes, there are Malorn trees. You could actually find a land that is very similar to this one. In fact, maybe even greater than this, certainly greater than this, to the west. That hasn't obviously come up. And so it's just interesting that it hasn't come up. That's all.
Yeah, it's probably she is tight-lipped, but we also have to bear in mind the isolation is also a form of denial in a way. Like, I don't want the world to change right now. I'm still getting over the loss of Celebrian. I'm still like, no, there is that aspect, but there's also the aspect that we have to bear in mind. She's also been tutoring Arwen and whatnot, and some of the other maidens of Rivendell. So she can't just cross over yet, until the next generation is ready to step up.
Yep.
So on the one hand, you could say tight-lipped, but on the other hand, you could say she's tight-lipped also because to keep the place together until such a time as it's ready to go west and fade.
Correct.
Right. But so there's a mixture of pride, but there's also knowledge. But I'll say the exterior is the knowledge. The deep down Freudian reason is the pride and whatnot.
Gotcha.
There's layers to the character.
Yep.
Just like there are onions. There's layers to onions and parfait that.
Parfait is the better one.
Okay, fine. So
especially chocolate.
Yeah, okay, I get it. But ogres do not like parfait. Anyways, speaking of orcs, Frodo reveals. Well, not Frodo. We learned the word for orc, Yerk, in Elvish as the elves realized there's orcs nearby. Or at least that's the suspicion. So Haldir soon realizes it was not an orc, and we will learn that it's Golem later.
Yep.
He nearly got slightly scared off for the moment, but that he could slip around the forest of the elves is quite impressive, if we're being honest. Now we get to the part which everybody loves, and that's blindfolding Gimli.
Right. The big highlight part of this chapter,
where he gets a little.
There is a blindfolding. The next frame after that.
Yeah. So we have Gimli, who doesn't much like it, and he says, the agreement was made without my consent. I will not walk blindfold like a beggar or a prisoner. And I am no spy. My folk have never had dealings with any of the servants of the enemy. Neither have we done harm to the elves. I am no more likely to betray you than Legolas.
He's absolutely
or
right.
any other of my companions. And that's the thing here is that that's true, because the kingdom under the mountain is a totally different than the other dwarvish kingdom that screwed over Dingle and his
Sure.
people.
They're separated by several thousand years.
Yeah, this is like if we said, all right, well, I'm gonna, like Aragorn, like I don't know about you, what was that Ar-Pharazôn business? That was like 3,000 to 4,000 years ago. Yeah, but that Ar-Pharazôn business. That's Numenor. I'm actually from Arnor. Like, what the heck? That'd be kind of the reaction. Or it's like, well, I just don't know about, let's say, England. What with what Rome did in the Dacian region? Well, that's separated by 2,000 years, and okay, like totally, completely different nations. Yes, but Rome colonized England, and England was within the Roman Empire for a time when Rome struck the Bulgarian region. So it counts. You'd kind of go, that's a stretch. Like I don't follow. So in that regard, there is like from Gimli's perspective, it's like, what does that have to do with me? You know what I mean? Like, I am following Diane, and we've basically refounded an old kingdom, sure, but this isn't a kingdom that's just in the past few thousand years. It's not as ancient as Galadriel. Not that I'm calling her old, because, you can't call a lady old, but it's that, it's a reach to him. But to Haldir, this is his job.
Yeah.
Now, but here's the interesting thing. Tolkien, using linguistics here, takes, interestingly, now I've been reading the Bible lately, and Tolkien slipped in here a bit of a criticism of Haldir. And it's in the line, I do not doubt you, yet this is our law. I am not the master of the law, and cannot set it aside. I have done much in letting you set foot over Celebrant. Now, where the criticism comes in is that in the Bible at one point, Jesus, to his enemies, says, you have torn out the very heart from the law. You follow the letter of the law, but you have torn the heart of the law out from it, to the Pharisees and Sadducees. So here, Haldir is following the letter of the law, but not thinking about the heart of the law. So that I get the sense that Tolkien is subtly, showing he doesn't approve of what Haldir is doing. Like, the narration is neutral on the surface, but if you pay attention to the linguistic and the language used, it seems that there's a reason to be critical of what Haldir is deciding here. And, you could lay the criticism that he's ignoring the heart of the law, that, yes, he has to protect Lothlorien, but Gimli has come in peace and with friends and with elf friends. So, and to suspect him and to be critical of him here in this manner, and to basically say, well, now that you're here, we're blindfolding you, otherwise we'll kill you, runs counter to the heart of the law Galadriel set down. So that, in a way, this is in defiance.
I get that. What's also, what I really like about this little passage, too, is that Legolas calls out Gimli's stubbornness, right? He goes, a plague on dwarves and their stiff necks. But then, like, within a paragraph, when it's up to Legolas, Aragorn says, "Hey, look, we'll all be blindfolded."
Yeah.
And so when Legolas realizes he's got to be blindfolded too, he gets upset, and so then Aragorn, kind of jabs at him with a plague on the stiff necks of elves. So it's like they're both really stubborn, essentially.
Yeah.
We see that they both have very similar stubbornness qualities.
Yeah, that's the funny part. Now, what's interesting is that, on the one hand, Legolas did not have the right to make the agreement for Gimli here. Thank you, Mark. Freddie would have been welcomed as
we'll probably have to wrap this up fairly soon anyway, because you're right. I have to go to bed in order to go to work in the near future as well. But thank you. And yes, Freddie would have been welcomed for sure. No blindfold for Freddie.
Yeah. Now, the interesting thing is, you have the plague on the stiff necks of elves. But I get the feeling Aragorn is genuinely annoyed there. Like, yeah, you're willing to blindfold everyone else but yourself, you hypocrite.
Like, I came up with a good plan. Can you just let this plan go? Thank you.
Yeah.
But it is a good plan. It's like, look, let's all just be blindfolded.
Yeah,
this way, no one is separated out. We're not condemning one of our group to have to be different from the others
and humiliated and whatnot.
Right.
And because Gimli is also, like I said before, an XP for Sir Gawain. So, Gawain does have his honor and his pride and dignity, which I'm not actually saying those as flaws. I'm saying them as virtues in the classic medieval sense. I've actually been reading Chrétien de Troyes' classic books, which include Gawain, and he's held up, for these qualities, just as Aragorn is in Lord of the Rings, for having his dignity, his pride, and his majesticness. But Gimli is kind of like that. So, and that being said, Legolas, I find that funny. But here's an interesting thing: Boromir, for all his pride, goes along with it without question. And
right, so great point.
Yeah, so like, although he's proud, he's like, okay, yeah, sure.
He's very agreeable to all this whole chapter. He's like team player guy for sure.
Yeah, I think he's like, yeah, we just lost Gandalf and I'm grieving and I don't, well, I don't really know what to do, so I'll just follow Aragorn's lead. Like,
yep.
I think he's agreeable and he's like, this entire, everything's happening so fast. He's just like, I'm glad someone else is taking command because otherwise it'd be me. And I have no clue what I'm doing here. Like, you know what I mean? When you're in shock and you're overwhelmed and you're
right.
What do I do? I always feel, this is why I don't, like, as a kid, you want to be the leader, but as an adult, you start to realize being leaders.
Plus, as one who's had to deal with orcs on a regular basis, he knows as well as anyone that they're going to send a large group after them. And so they're going to need, if they were just to meet orcs on an open plain, they'd be killed. So he's like, okay, if you have a plan for avoiding this onslaught, let's do it. I think that's where he comes down to.
Now, to be fair to Haldir, when it's like, okay, you're all to be blindfolded. Okay, this is weird, but okay. He's like, he's kind of just saying, oh, this situation is just getting weirder and weirder.
Right.
Come on. Like, so I've been hard on him, and yeah, it is an enclosed world, but it's like, okay, this is just getting so weird. And like, but I have to say that Pippin and Boromir, who are usually the ones to pipe up and complain sometimes, are like, okay. So they get massive kudos and even Sam for just going, all right, we'll play we'll play ball.
Right, because they don't want to humiliate. Well, in fact, I guess it wouldn't have mattered. They don't want to humiliate Gimli, but Gimli was not going to be humiliated anyway. So let's keep Gimli alive, essentially.
Yeah, he's our MVP. But then you have, like, they tread into Lothlorien, which is an amazing location in Middle Earth. Sorry, I have to gush. It is an amazing location, and it's pointed out there lies the fastness of southern Mirkwood. In passing, and we get that scene which you had mentioned about Aragorn and Arwen, Karen Amroth, and the rest of the chapter is basically them just walking. There's a great meme
taking in the beauty of the area.
Yeah, and there's a great meme video about Tolkien meeting with publishers and just saying, and they'll be walking and walking and walking. And I'm not done yet. They have more walking to do. You've seen it, right? It's hilarious.
Right? Yeah.
I'll try to find it for next time. It's the funniest thing I've seen in years. I love it, and it is so very true.
I'll point out one little factoid. It comes a little earlier in the chapter. There's a line that says, so that's Karen Emroth, a depiction of it. It says, the line says, when Frodo came at last up on onto the flet, he found Legolas seated with 3 other elves. They were clad in shadowy gray and could not be seen among the tree stems unless they moved suddenly. They stood up, and one of them uncovered, this is the important part, uncovered a small lamp that gave out a slender silver beam. It says he held it up, looking at Frodo's face and Sam's. Then he shut off the light again and spoke words of welcome. So this lamp, I think, is actually pretty important. It's a quick throwaway line. You're like, wait, they had lamps with silver beams of light? I think this is connected to something we see in Unfinished Tales. And actually, it's one of the slides I've got. The one before the blindfold slide is the one I'm thinking about. That one. That is a reference to this is Tuor being shown guided through this passageway by 2 elves, Gelmir and Arminas. And in the description it says, and then Gelmir brought forth one of those lamps for which the Noldor were renowned, for they were made of old in Valinor, and neither wind nor water could quench them. And when they were unhooded, they sent forth a clear blue light from a flame imprisoned in white crystal.
The Feanorian lamps.
There's a footnote that says, in a note, they're called Feanorian lamps, of which the Noldor themselves did not know the secret. And they were there described as crystals hung in a fine chain net, the crystals being ever shining with an inner blue radiance. So this is obviously not exactly that, because these are silver light instead of blue light. But I would say to you, they're Feanor. So Feanor made them. Feanor created these the tech. Galadriel, of course, is Feanor's niece. She's a Noldor. We're going to see in the next chapter, in the next 2 chapters, she's actually pretty good at making devices herself. She has that Aule the Smith kind of ability to make tech.
But
and so
it just adds to her. She's brilliant. Yeah.
And so, and the other note is Arminas and Gelmir, the 2 elves in that picture right there, who have a Feanorian lamp. They were followers of Angrod, who is Galadriel's brother back in the First Age. Uh-huh. So that tech was being used by elves closely associated with Galadriel and her family. I think because of all the tech that we see later in this Lothlorien series of chapters, I think she's figured out a way to make a version of a Feanorian lamp that they use in Lothlorien.
I don't know on her own. I think it was passed down.
Gotcha.
But
yep.
I think she deserves a lot of credit because she, like you said, but I think she deserves a lot of credit for how do I put it? Maybe not reverse engineering, but like preserving.
Certainly, that's what she's interested in, for sure. Is that it's what the ring is doing? It's what the is preserving what was.
Yeah.
We've got a reference. Joe Quake is wondering whether the Heart of Darkness is a reference there. I'm looking up.
Maybe.
Heart of Darkness was 1899. I just looked it up, so it could be. I tend to think not. I think it's just
Tolkien would have read it.
It's probably a reference to the idea of the Heart of Darkness, but I would guess it's not a reference to that book. But it's a fun idea, and you're right. There is a river voyage, and they're going. Boromir becomes.
I think he's cracking a joke. Tolkien liked his jokes. He had a developed sense of humor. But I also think the thing with Galadriel, I was going to say it. What was I going to say? I think I forgot.
Well, we've got, obviously Galadriel.
Oh, right.
Talking all about
it's
her.
That, I was going to say that clearly, if Feanor was around, he'd have sued her because that's his patent and his copyright.
Yeah.
And she just
and it's interesting that the fact that the Feanorian lamp gives off a light, it's a crystal that gives off light. So it feels like it was maybe a prototype of his Silmaril tech, right? Where it's like he finds a way to have a gem actually emanate light as opposed to just absorb it or something. So early tech.
Yeah.
So anyway, but those are my thoughts on this awesome chapter,
This chapter
Lothlorien, as we head to the Mirror of Galadriel next, which obviously is hugely
we get
impactful.
everything. We get elf lore, we get dwarf elf conflict, we get references to the Silmarillion, we get the Fëanorian lamps, we get Legolas actually doing something, which he's kind of been in the background for a bit.
Yep.
We get Boromir, who, while he's not overtly characterized, we get a different side of him. The agreeable right-hand man, like the not enough emphasis is ever put on the fact that he did have an agreeable side, and he, like had they reached Gondor and whatnot, I'm of the opinion he'd have been redeemed, and it would have been him submitting the stewardship to Aragorn.
Okay.
And I think every decision Boromir would have made in a lot of ways.
There was a time when I would have disagreed with you, but and rereading as what we've done here as we've gone through our rereading of this stuff, I'm more inclined to agree with you on that.
Yeah, it's also like I think it has to do with Aragorn, because when you're in his presence, it's like you're inspired. He's one of those men you find yourself agreeing, even part of Boromir might say, "Well, I'd like to be like Daddy," but when he's in Aragorn's presence, it's like, "Yes, my king." You kind of find yourself rotating around him. In KOTOR 2, Kreia talks about being around Revan, you'd agree with things you didn't think you'd agree with, because it's like looking into power itself. But interestingly, people talk about how Exile is much more charismatic in that game. And Aragorn is like that. He's just so charismatic. People just agree and they go, "What the heck was I doing?" I didn't think I was going to agree with him there. But when Aragorn is depressed or something, he doesn't shine and glimmer. At the beginning of this chapter, he's a little depressed. It's the desperation that keeps anyone from questioning him. But in the middle to end, he's coming back into himself. He's regaining himself. So, yeah, this chapter also has Golem, which is great.
Right.
We have orcs. So we have orcs, elves, dwarves, and Golem. So it's got everything. But it's just lacking Galadriel, because everybody wants to get to her. And
that's right. And we're gonna get a good dose of Galadriel coming up here. 2 chapters, starting with the Mirror of Galadriel, where Frodo almost tanks the entire quest by offering the ring to his host.
Oops.
But she's steadfast. We'll talk about that next time. But
next time, which will, I think, be on your channel, right?
It will be. We'll be back on Dork Lords. We're currently covering also on Dork Lords the new sci-fi show Pluribus.
What's
from
that?
The creator of Breaking Bad. It's a fun, high concept sci-fi premise. Real fast, it's just essentially it's an alien virus removes free will, but makes all of humanity happy and content, except for 13 unaffected people. Anyway, blah blah blah. It's fun. It's a fun sci-fi show.
I've never seen Breaking Bad either, so I don't know what that's about.
I'm actually not a huge Breaking Bad devotee, but I can appreciate the craft and skill at which it was made, and it's the same craft and skill being put behind this show. But all that said, I'm working on my next Tolkien video as well. So what's coming up on the Brothers channels, good sirs?
Well, primarily we're continuing our audio drama, which we're making in concert with you, which is coming along really nicely. We are finally going to be finished The Man Who Fought Himself King, which is the third story in the Crown of Blood cycle. The story of Ringen, who will get himself offed finally this week. And then
I'm the one. I'm doing the narration reading on that. I gotta do the next chapter for that. So I got my work cut out for me.
It's a short one, and then it's going to be starting next week the Sword and Sorcery story with Einar, whom is also one of the few single dads we write about.
Good night, Shelby. Thank you so much for staying up with us. We
Shelby.
really appreciate it.
Take care.
Awesome to hear from you.
Yep. So we're going to be our channel. We're working on that, on this audio drama, and I'm really excited for next week because I really do like that story Dan wrote, which is a sword and sorcery single dad adventure, which I always thought was kind of neat. That we got Dan went a different path than Conan and instead made him a single dad trying to save his son, and his son saves himself as well. And it's like, I thought that was pretty cool. So I hope people will really like that next week. So that's coming up for this week and next week. Over on Substack, we're writing a lot of articles still about Tolkien, Robert E. Howard. We're going to be writing about the 9 Wervies and from medieval folklore and symbolism and whatnot. But I've also been invited to write about a painting again. So there's a lot we're covering on Brothers Grimm over on Substack. So you're welcome to join us over there because we're covering a lot of material there. But as far as novels go, I'm currently working on redrafting Crown of Blood, which I had put aside for a bit because I had so many other things. But Crown of Blood Part 2 and Akuma no Ren, our Japanese epic fantasy novel, are about to be finished the current drafts, and then they're going to be sent off to the editors. So by December, these things will be off our table and over with the editor probably, and the editor will make of them what he will. Crown of Blood will, of course, be the first one finished, and we're hoping to get that finished before Christmas so that people will have Part 2, which covers the latter half of the Tannislayer Wars. As for Akuma no Ren, but you can follow a lot of these projects over on Royal Road as well, where we publish a lot of our novels as web novels. And
nice, you guys got a lot going on.
Yeah. Have to, because my teaching hours are just 20 hours a week, and but next year, who knows? I think it'll be bumped up to 25 hours, and my pay triples. So
that's right. You mentioned that. So
yeah, oh my gosh, that'll be such a relief. I'll be able to buy a house soon afterwards.
Yay!
Yay! Dad's got yay. That'll be such a relief. Then yeah. But anyways, I will recommend everyone go over to the Dork Lords channel and subscribe over there because one of the funnest and coolest channels out there. And Matt really does cover all these TV shows, which I have yet to catch up on. So in a lot of ways, if you want all that stuff and Tolkien and a lot of other stuff, Dork Lords is really the nexus point. And Dork Lords is almost at 5,000 subs. So we got to pump up those numbers.
Closer. We're
getting closer.
Yeah, we're like I don't know. We're like 60 or 70 away. So anyway, we're getting.
We got to work on them. We gotta push that forward. Low turd dad joke. Low.
Yeah, I was just doing they were talking about Saul Goodman, another very good Breaking Bad spinoff. Was Better Call Saul, and so anyway, blah blah blah. But Saul Goldberry. But yeah, so we will be back on the Dork Lords. We're gonna find a time. Maybe it'll be one of those weekend afternoons or something that might be a little better for everybody. But we'll do that. We had a good turnout though. You guys were awesome out there in internet land. So thanks for joining us at this later hour. And yeah, we'll be talking about the Mirror of Galadriel. We're really excited about that.
Okay.
So yeah, well, thank you everybody for joining us.